All right, for those of you who know me well, you know that I do not enjoy public speaking at all. But I have been here at Shadow Rock from the very beginning of time, and David asked if I would share the history of Shadow Rock Church at some point a few months ago. And when John Shader, who attends our church, who's an eye doctor, asked if David would go to Mexico with him this weekend, David said, it would be a perfect opportunity for you to share the history of Shadow Rock Church. And so that is what I'm doing today. I recognize there are many people, though our church has been around for 15 years, there are many people who have no idea what the history of the church is. And so I'm going to be sharing that story today. But before that, and I am going to end with, or insert in the middle of this sermon, biblical principles, but I'll just warn some of you who are here today that really want like a lot of biblical texts, and you really enjoy like the Greek and Hebrew and all the things that David incorporates into the sermon. This is not that today. So it'll be a little bit practical and interesting, but it's a different kind of sermon today. So I'm going to be telling 3 stories. The first is the story of Barney Banana. And I know it probably seems a little crazy, but when I was little, my mom was my Sunday school teacher in Oregon. And back in those days, we didn't have good curriculum for children. And so the children's curriculum was basically every Sunday my mom would make up stories and tie it into some biblical principle, and we would all learn from that. And it actually was very effective. I still remember the story of Barney Banana. And this was the story of Barney Banana. Barney was a green banana in Costa Rica, and he had a dream that someday he would be a bright yellow banana in a little kid's lunchbox. And in his dream and his vision, he would think, I want that little kid someday to open up his lunchbox and for all the other little kids in school to just be in awe of the big, bright yellow banana, and for all the kids to say, oh, what a beautiful banana. I'll trade you for my orange. And the little kid would say, nope. I'll trade you for my cookie. Nope. I'll trade you for my apple. Nope. Barney Banana is all mine. And the little kid would eat Barney Banana, and that would be the end of the story. That was how Barney envisioned the end of his life, and he was very excited about that dream. So Barney was a green banana in Costa Rica and thought, how in the world is this dream ever going to happen? Well, one day a man came along and was chopping down all the green bananas, and he stuck them in a crate, put it in a boat. Barney was just miserable and seasick, and it was really hard. But all of a sudden, when the crate opens, there's a little market nearby, and he's in the United States, and he thinks, oh my goodness, maybe my dream is going to come true. And so he puts himself out there, and every time a lady would come by in the market wanting to buy bananas, he would think, maybe she'll pick me, and I'll end up in a little kid's lunchbox. And every time a mom would come by with 2 little kids in the cart, he would just get really excited that maybe his dream would come true. Well, Barney Banana fell on the ground. He ended up turning rotten. He had brown spots all over him, and his dream looked like it was never going to come true. But a lady came by one day and said, oh, rotten bananas, just what I've always wanted. I'm so excited. They're only 10 cents. So she grabbed the bananas, took them home, peeled them. Barney was miserable and cold. And all of a sudden, he's mixed together with flour and sugar and eggs, and he's put in a really hot oven. But then, before you know it, he comes out smelling delicious, and it's banana bread. And the next day, Barney Banana found himself in a little kid's lunchbox with all the other little kids going, oh, banana bread, I'll trade you for my apple. Nope. I'll trade you for my orange. Nope. I'll trade you for my cookie. Nope. And the little kid ate Barney Banana as banana bread. And the moral of the story was God's endings sometimes are different from the endings that you think they're going to be. And sometimes they're even better. Even when it feels like there's no way good can come out of this, ultimately, God's plan can be better than ours. The story in the Bible that I also want to allude to is the story of Joseph. Joseph actually parallels Jesus in his life. He was the perfect person. When you see all kinds of stories of people that made horrible mistakes and you go, I can identify with that. I can identify with that. They made all kinds of bad mistakes. Joseph was known as the person of character and integrity. He did everything right. In fact, I used to think that when he told his dream to his brother, so I'll just tell you, Joseph was loved by his father. His father gave him this coat of many colors. He was loved by his father, but he was hated by his brothers. He had a dream when he was little that someday he was going to be ruling over the land, ruling over the brothers. And he told the brothers this dream, and they hated him for it. They threw him in a pit. They sold him into slavery. Joseph's life was not easy from that point. For many years, there was a lot of hardship. In fact, he was accused of being inappropriate with Potiphar's wife. She accused him of things that he didn't do. He ends up in jail because of it and was sitting there for years in a jail cell for something he didn't do. Though he had done everything right, life was hard. It's a story that not all of us can relate to because none of us would say we've been perfect, we've done everything right, but we aspire to be like Jesus. Joseph actually was the representation of Jesus, who came to this earth, was despised by others, said, someday I am going to be ruling, it's a different kind of kingdom, and people hated him for it and they turned on him, but he had a vision, he had a dream from God, and he knew the end of the story and what that was going to be. So through his suffering, he held on to the dream. When life doesn't go the way you thought it would, be open to a banana bread ending. I'm going to be sharing the story of Shadow Rock in just a moment, but before that, I want to give you 3 points that you can think about. If you're in a situation right now where you're thinking, this isn't the way it was supposed to be, it's not the dream that I had for my life. I expected when I married this person for life to be good or easy, and it's not. Or I thought I was going to have my health, and I no longer do. Or I thought my child was going to serve God, and they don't. And it feels really hard and painful, and you don't know what to do. What can you focus on in those times? So I just want to give you 3 very practical things you can think about if you're in this place where life isn't going the way that you think it would, you thought it would, or you think it should. You can focus on 3 things. The first, to bring peace into your pain. Number 1, discover your purpose. Mark Twain was famously known for saying, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Not the day you die, the day you find out why. Why is that? Because that's when you discover your purpose. Purpose is so crucial. When you're in the hard times and you don't have purpose, you just stay stuck there. But when you've got purpose, it drives you. I think of, every time I talk about Craig, I cry. So just be prepared. I'm going to be crying throughout the sermon. But I think about Craig when he was diagnosed with cancer. He had a purpose that drove him. He would go through chemotherapy, hardship, pain, agony that nobody saw. And a lot of times, I would say probably nobody saw but me. Hardship, pain. But he would get up every single Sunday. He'd stand here and he'd preach a sermon because he had purpose. And that purpose drove him. And when you understand why you're doing what you're doing, it helps so much. Even if it's something as menial as, why am I getting up at 5:30 in the morning to make my kids lunches? And you just feel so discouraged with it. But then you remember, oh, this is good for them. This is going to make their day better. This is going to nourish them. It changes your perspective. Or why am I cleaning my house? It can be the most mundane things, but you find purpose in what you're doing. Oh, it makes my family happier. It makes things better. Why am I going to work every single day? Because I'm providing for my family. That purpose behind what you do matters. On Thursdays, I drive to La Quinta High School and I set up chairs. And sometimes I'm sweating at the end of FCA because I've set up 180 chairs for the teenagers that come. But you know why I do it? Or we hand out pizzas and we're working so hard at this because we know that there's going to be a teenager that day that comes into that room, they come for the pizza, but they hear about Jesus and their lives are changed forever. And that purpose drives me. And setting up the chairs and sweating a little feels insignificant by comparison. So know the why behind what you do. Also, choose your perspective. When you're in times of pain, it's so easy to look at everything around you that's so hard and have tunnel vision around the hardship. One of the things that I've was keenly aware of through the whole cancer journey as I was part of this Facebook group where everybody had stage 4 colon cancer. I would see people with good perspectives and people with bad perspectives. Same situation. Everybody's dealing with the same thing. But you had people that were awful in the things that they would say, and then people that were inspiring in the things that they would say. And I would just think, man, attitude is everything. Your perspective is everything. 1 Peter 4:12-13 says, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery trial that has come on you to test you as though something strange were happening to you, but rejoice as you participate in the sufferings of Jesus so that you may be overjoyed when the glory is revealed." There's theology in the suffering. In the suffering, focus on something else. Don't focus on the suffering. For this light and moment, in 2 Corinthians 4:17-18, "For this light and momentary affliction is preparing for us eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are unseen are transient. Things that are seen are transient. The things that are unseen are eternal. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." Most of the time, more important than what happens to us is how we think about what happens to us. It's our perspective. Viktor Frankl was a famous psychologist who was actually in the concentration camps. And he developed something called logotherapy, which is all about discovering meaning in life. And when he was in the concentration camps, he was able to apply his theory of discovering meaning. And what helped him survive the concentration camps was what he would think about. And he would think about, maybe if my wife is still alive and I get to see her someday, he would envision the conversations he'd have with her, and that drove him, it kept him going. He had that perspective, and he said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstances. In the worst circumstances imaginable, Viktor Frankl held to the belief that the most critical freedom is an individual's ability to choose one's attitude. So choose your attitude, focus on things above, focus on a heavenly perspective, and trust God's plan. When you can't trace his hand, trust his heart. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Paul says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed in us by faith." The history of Shadow Rock Church began, actually, this is my family. And in 2005, we looked a little bit different. If we can go back to Central Assembly, Springfield, Missouri, 2005. My kids were little. And we met a couple there named Bruce and Christy Durkee. Bruce and Christy, some of you know who they are, but their kids were little also. And Craig and I became friends with them. This was our Sunday school class that Bruce and Christy started by accident. They were dropping their kids off at church and then sneaking over to Panera Bread for some alone time. And before they knew it, they found other couples from our church doing the same thing. We attended a church of a couple thousand people. Well, before you knew it, it grew into this Sunday school class that Craig heard about. Craig was the connections pastor at the church, and he was like, that's perfect. Let's announce it to the whole church and have everybody go. So he did, and the Sunday school class exploded. Well, we became friends with Bruce and Christy. And if you wonder, when did Shadow Rock Church start? Like the thought of Shadow Rock Church. I'll tell you when it started was we were on a boat in 2006, June 2006, with our new friends, Bruce and Christy Durkee, and this other couple, Paul and Rhonda Martinez. And we were sitting in the boat in the middle of the lake in the evening, and we're in Springfield, Missouri. And Paul Martinez says, "Hey, you guys, I have a thought. Would you all be willing to pray for the next 30 days about all of us doing a church plant somewhere in the country? It doesn't matter where, but I think it would just be amazing." Paul was vice president of the Assemblies of God Theological Seminary. Bruce was working as an attorney for the Assemblies of God. Craig was a pastor. And they said, we can all join forces together and go do a church plant somewhere in the country. Pray for 30 days, fast something, and we'll resume in 30 days. So we did. And when we came back, the conclusion was, Bruce and Christy said, well, actually, in the last 30 days, we've decided to leave Springfield, leave our job here, go back to the desert where we grew up, and start a practice there, a law practice. And so if you guys want to come out, we can do a church plant there. Paul and Rhonda said, we've been praying for the last 30 days, and we feel like God is saying not quite yet. And Craig and I said, we've been praying for the last 30 days, and we feel like the answer is no. So we all had it, like we were way off. So Bruce and Christy moved away. We all went on with our lives. February of 2007, Craig and I went out to dinner for Valentine's Day. And we were sitting there talking about how wonderful our life was. We both had kind of achieved everything in our lives and careers, ministry that we had wanted to. We had a home on the golf course. We had a boat. Craig was on staff at a church of a couple thousand people. I was a director at the National Institute of Marriage, and we had very fulfilled lives. And I said to Craig, if you could do anything in the world right now, what would you do? And he said, as great as life is, he said, there's this thing in me. I just keep thinking about that conversation we had last year with Bruce and Christy and Paul and Rhonda about doing a church plant. And he said, I wonder if that's still in like a possibility, if that's what God has for us. And I said, well, let's call them and see if we can go out and see the area. So Craig called them on our way out of the restaurant, Valentine's Day 2007. He said, hey, Bruce and Christy, I know we haven't talked to you in the last 7 or 8 months. Hope you're doing well. We've got spring break in a couple weeks. What would you think if we just drove out and saw you guys? They said, sure, come on out. So we took our kids, drove 2 weeks later across the country, and came to California to the desert and spent a few days with them. And at the end of our time, 2 things happened that were significant that weekend. One was we went to Southwest Community Church on a Saturday night. And while we were sitting in the auditorium, the pastor said, there's within a 5-mile radius of this church, 4% of the population goes to church anywhere. And something stirred in our hearts, and we realized we're living in Springfield, Missouri, where there is literally a church on every block. I think 95% of the population goes to church. And we thought, if we give up our lives here and we're willing to go out there, we can go to a place that is really unchurched and make a difference. And so that And then when we got back to their house, we kept talking, and Bruce said, Craig, let me show you something. He drives him literally to this place right across the parking lot. There used to be an old ice skating rink right across from the last building we were in, and Bruce said, this would be a great location for a church plant. So that was the beginning of the dream. We said, we'll pray about it. We went back. God just kept doing something in our hearts. But we couldn't figure out how in the world to make this happen. How do you give up your jobs, move to a location where there's no church, and then just start something? Like there's no finances, no ability to make this happen. Well, Bruce came up with an idea of starting a corporation. We met with Richard and Joy Varnell and a couple other people, started a corporation that was going to be the Shadow Mountain Project, and we were just going to raise money to come out, and we thought it might take years to make that happen. But then a few months later, Richard and Joy Varnell, who's Bruce and Christy's father-in-law, they had planted a church actually in Thousand Palms, and that church had been in existence since the 80s. They had put years of labor into this place and had a vision that someday that would be the church that would make a huge difference in the whole community. And Christy's brother, Matt, was pastoring that church, and she said, Matt has to step down for health reasons, and so this church is available. It's about 20 minutes away. If you guys want to come out and just pastor that church, and maybe we can all plant other churches from that church as time goes on. So the original vision was for that church in Thousand Palms to be the mother church of, our hope was 5 other churches. That was our original vision, that would stay in existence and 5 other churches would come out of it. That was our Barney banana dream, the big yellow banana. And it didn't quite turn out that way. We came out and it was fun and hard is how I would say it. Financially, it was hard. We had so many financial struggles when we first came. We went back and forth 2 years after being at this beautiful little church in Thousand Palms. We just felt like, man, we just had this vision of all these young families and the church exploding, and it just wasn't happening. But we said, maybe this is a time that we can start this church in La Quinta. And one morning, as I'm waking up from a dream, as we're ready to talk with the school district building in La Quinta about starting a church in La Quinta, I'm waking up from a dream, and I see in my dream this building. I didn't know it at the time, but I saw this building with many young families coming into this building, and I heard the Lord say, cast your net on the other side of the boat. And I knew he was saying, you're supposed to do something in La Quinta, now is the time. And so I communicated that with everybody. We talked with the school district. We started there. The beautiful people from Thousand Palms would come over. Some of you are sitting here today, and you'd come over and help rock babies, and you were part of the original plant. But a couple years into going back and forth between the two locations, it felt unsustainable, and the church ended up voting to sell the building in Thousand Palms and put that money into a fund for someday when we would be able to have a church of our own, because we didn't want to just waste it and have nothing to show for it at the end. So that was set in a protected account. And then years went by where we were in the school district building for 4 years, and then they kicked us out and said, this isn't a permanent location. So we ended up finding another location that this Patios Plus, we renovated that and turned that into another building. But that one was so expensive. It was like $11,000 a month at the end of our time there just to rent the 6,800 square foot facility. And then so we sold it to a Korean church, that building in Thousand Palms, and that's that group that you see there. And so we were able to be a blessing to them, and we see God's doing work with the Korean community through that church there. But the funds from that were put in an account, and a few years went by, and I was on commercial real estate looking for property for the organization I was working with that wanted to start something in the valley. And while I was looking, I saw this building. It was a gym at the time for sale, and it was $1.6 million was the asking price. And so I called Craig and Bruce and said, hey, do you guys want to look at this building? Maybe this would be an option for us. And they were like, well, it's in a zone where they don't allow churches. And so we kept feeling like God was telling us this was the building. And we ended up putting an offer on this building with it still being like it was not allowed to be a church ever. That's how the law was written. But there was another bid on it, and Bruce said, go ahead and do the offer. I may be living in that building all by myself and paying for it all by myself, but I will fight it. It's unconstitutional. They can't say a church can't be in it. I'll fight it. He fought it long after we purchased it. He was still fighting it until he finally prevailed. This building, when we purchased it, was not allowed to be a church. It's a church today. We ended up having no idea how this was all going to look. I'll tell you, there has been a lot of pain along the way. The last thing we expected was right before we put an offer on this building, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and was given 6 months to a year to live. No, 3 to 6 months to live. And so all he wanted was and I show these two pictures just to represent, there were times in the 4-year journey where he looked good and he was happy. And so much, it's like he's in the chemo chair the first day, like so, chipper. And then you'd see him just struggling too. And the struggle was real. There was a lot of pain. In the 4 years, I think the thing we keep from everybody is how much pain there was. There was a lot. But we both felt the purpose drive us. Craig, one day before he passed away, stood here and passed the church on to David. And we didn't know how life was going to go, but we knew that God had an ending that was different from the ending we thought it was going to be. I just want to read this to you. June of 2023, Craig passed away. He got to see his vision come to fruition, which is why he was so passionate about SRC. He knew this place would be a place where people would come to know Christ, and as a result, they'd be in heaven for all of eternity. That mission drove him. He wanted to help create something that was bigger than himself. He wanted to help build a church that would outlast him, and it did. He died, having gotten to see the fruit of his labor. His greatest desire was to see his children serving the Lord, and they have been steadfast through all of this. His second greatest desire was to build a church that would be a beacon of hope to this community, a church where people would come and find healing and hope, a place that would change their destinies forever. You sit here today in a building that has been prayed about for years, blood, sweat, tears, countless hours of hard work have gone into this place so it can be used to make a difference in people's lives for all of eternity. Every one of you plays a part. Maybe your part feels significant, maybe it feels insignificant, but none of it is insignificant to God. All of us play an important part, whether you're running the sound in the back so that the people that are watching online can have a good experience, or you're rocking babies in the nursery. We're all doing this together because we believe that there's a purpose that's bigger than ourselves. Today, I want to honor two couples that without whom this church really would not be in existence today. And I think so often in life, you just live your life and you're not connecting all the dots. But today, I just want to connect a couple dots and honor Richard and Joy Varnell and Bruce and Christy Durkee, without whom this church would not exist. If you could come up here. I have these things. You guys can come on up. This says, Richard and Joy, Shadow Rock is here because of you. Joy will be in the second service with Richard, but it's a beautiful clock that represents the time we have on this earth. May be temporary, but the impact goes on for all eternity. And I want to thank you. So I just want to thank all of you for the part you play, and recognize that even when life seems hard and you feel bruised and you feel discarded, there's a purpose and a plan that he wants you to hold on to, and there can still be banana bread endings.